The hero archetype essay gave you an opportunity to write an argument essay about a character and what kind of archetype that character represents. For this honors assignment, you are going to write a different kind of an essay. This one is where you analyze a piece of film from the ground up, and you find a ticket, a way to approach that analysis. Now, in order to do this, you're going to have to pick a movie that you love, and it's going to have to be a movie that is that contains a lot of information. Because if you find an obscure film, although that's fun, and you can do that in the other assignments that we have where you review a film, for this essay, for this experience, you're going to want to make it easy on yourself by finding a film that is big and that has lots of information about it. So for the purposes of this demonstration, here's the film that I chose. Okay, so I'm going to go with Star Wars because I know there are plenty of interviews, there is access to scripts, and I can find the information that I need. So you know me by now, I'm a visual learner, so I go first. First I open up a project in EasyBib. Let's do that. Okay, create a list. Okay, now it's there, and go ahead and open that so that we can add all the citations. Now, my first stop is YouTube to listen to an interview with George Lucas about I'm only dealing with the very first Star Wars. We can't go crazy on this. We're not writing a dissertation. So I'm only looking at the first one and the evolution of the script from the outline, the concept, to the outline, to the actual shooting script, to the final film. Okay, so I'm going to start with this. And during this interview, he uses a very interesting term to describe Star Wars. And he says he wanted to create a space opera, like a soap opera, only in space. So now I've got a handle on this essay, and I'm going to look at it, how it evolved as a space opera from script to the final product. Now I want you to see this in EasyBib. I put the share link here in EasyBib. Look at what it does. It's not going to find it. Right? So that means that we have to create a manual citation. And that means I'm going to fill in the title of this interview and the author and so forth. I'll be right back. Okay, so notice that from the YouTube video, I have this. This is the interviewer. This is George Lucas. That was where you add another contributor. And then there's the URL and then the date that the video was made. And notice that I have that information because over here, I can open, let me, hold on. In the three dots, I'm going to open the transcript. And then over here, I can quote from the transcript. It'll give me the timestamp so that I can cite anything from this transcript that I want to use. Makes it super easy to use a tutorial or anything that I find on YouTube. Next. So this is what I mean by finding a little nugget whenever I'm listening to an interview. Again,
Gonna happen next. Let's go all the way back to the beginning.
Let's go all the way back to the beginning.
I would say probably
What was the beginning?
the
I would say
original
probably
impetus for the whole thing was
original impetus
I used
for
to
the
watch
whole
it
thing was
I used to watch
serial
on television called Adventure Theater,
and
serial
they
on
had
television called
Flash
Adventure
Gordon
Theater,
and they had Flash Gordon, Conquerors of the
So
Universe
I
on
went
it.
off
I used to
and
love
wrote my
that.
own
So I
space
went off
opera.
and wrote my.
So next step is to find the treatment. The treatment is a short document that is pitched, so to speak, in any number of ways to try to get somebody to be interested in the project. And George Lucas had just written American Graffiti, which was a teen cult classic kind of a format. And now he's doing this huge grand project. So this is the next stop on the train, which is to look at the treatment that was submitted. And this was submitted in 1973. So I'm going to look through here, and I'm going to not copy and paste the whole thing. I'm going to look at key parts of the narrative that serve his original intent. And that is to create a space opera that would lend itself to more additions. Needless to say, and I'll only remind you this once, I'm going to cite everything I go to. I actually do that before I even look at anything. Whether I ever use it or not, I absolutely find that and find it because it's a PDF, I suppose. Okay, so it's not going to find it that way. So we'll look at the other options and scroll down here, and we'll do manuscript because this is the treatment. So we'll just go through and do it like this. Be right back. And here, once again, when we cite something, we put in what we can. It's not going to necessarily have all of these boxes, so we fill in whatever is possible, and that's the source title. This is the treatment, and the important thing, of course, is the URL where it came from and the website. Okay? All right, so then we just complete the citation. All right, moving on. Once the treatment is completed, then the playwright creates the rough draft. And all of these things I found because this is a big movie with lots of possibilities. Now, can you do a smaller movie? Of course you can, as long as you can find the elements that led up to the creation of the actual film. Absolutely. Absolutely. Go for it. If you can find all the elements, you can do whatever you like to do. Okay, so this is the rough draft script. I'm going to go through here last. You think, okay, I'm going to start with the rough draft. No, I'm not. I'm going to start with the final shooting draft, which is the draft that they use to actually make the film from. But I've got this one. I have it cited, and I have it saved in my folder on my computer, so I can come back to the rough draft. Now this, I've gone to this nifty little website here, Internet Movie Script Database. There are lots of databases where I can find the shooting script. The shooting script is often not hard to find. It's the first script, the rough draft, that can be tricky. Okay, so here we have it. And this 3 years later that we have the script. Now this isn't an actual shooting script because the scene numbers and all that stuff aren't here. But I'm going to actually watch the movie now, the very first Star Wars movie, and I'm going to watch that and follow along in the script. And I'm going to, with my yellow highlighter, highlight anything that's not there in the final script. Okay? Now I'm ready to create my analysis. I'm ready to create my skeleton outline. I like to call it bone structure. You can call it whatever you like. Okay, so I've opened up a notepad and I'm going to create my skeleton. Let's see how much you've learned so far. Okay, so the introduction, first sentence obviously is going to be the concept, my interest, 1 or 2 sentences. I like to do this for myself when I'm creating a shorter essay, as this is going to be. This is going to be about 2,000 words, so this isn't going to be a long 35-page essay. So I like to direct myself so that I'm not just babbling. And I know that if all I have are 2 sentences to write about the concept of the film and my interest in it, you know I'm going to be careful about what those two sentences say. So I'm not just going to go off rambling about Star Wars produced by this studio. I'm not going to do that because I only have two sentences. Okay. So now, after I've done this, what's my next section going to be? And the next section is going to be obviously more than just the one paragraph. But what is this section going to be? Think about it a second. That's right, the definition section. I can assume that my reader might have heard of Star Wars, but beyond that, I assume nothing. So the definition section, what did I just indicate in the transition sentence before that indicated what this first part of the definition section is going to be? That's right, author intent. And that's where we go to that YouTube video that we watched of him. So let's fill this in a little bit. Okay, so here I am in the first section of the definition is going to be George Lucas. From that interview, he's influenced by superhero fiction, which I'll detail, the soap opera format. How did I find out about the soap opera format? That's right, I just played it for you. It was the first few things that he said, and in one or two sentences, I'm going to describe what the soap opera format is because I researched it. And I will cite that as I write my two sentences about a soap opera format. Do you see why the strategy is so important? Because I could get lost in here, couldn't I? Now all of a sudden I'm watching General Hospital. All I wanted to do was find out the soap opera format, and I can get so step off into this little rabbit hole, and all of a sudden the next thing you know I'm sitting there watching soap operas all day. That's why it's important to go back to the strategy. Okay, so the superhero fiction, which I'll find out about, and I'll have maybe two sentences for this. The big part that I'm using for my analysis is this space opera format. I've got 3 sentences to explain what a soap opera format is and how his goal was to interpret that into a huge movie. And what would be the third thing? Creating something new, which is what he says in his little interview. So now I've explained the author intent. What did he want to do? And now what do I need to tell the reader? That's right, I need to tell the reader what he did do. So now we're going to do this, which is, remember, we're still in the definition section. So, okay, because this is the evolution of a movie, this next little part of the definition section is the Star Wars plot synopsis. Again, assuming that the reader has heard the title but not necessarily seen the film. I only have 8 sentences to do this, and only 3 of them can be quoted from a synopsis that I find somewhere. The rest has to be written in my own words, and not kind of sort of taking something that they wrote and sort of messing it around just a little bit so that it appears to be my own words, but actually in my own words, because first of all, it's the integrity of the essay. Second of all, it is vitally important that we understand that the nature of software that seeks plagiarism you can't fool it. It's going to see if I have tried to just make something up. So it's got to be in my own words. 5 well-crafted, wordsmithed sentences in my own words, 5 sentences, and then 3 that I can quote from a source. Then I'm going to talk about the theme because, again, we go back to, what do we go back to when we're thinking about this? That's right, we go back to the author intent. What did the author want to have happen? And that's where we come into the themes of Star Wars. I can use part of it from those interviews with him, and I can use part of it for what was written about the first, remember, only the first movie. You can't go wild with this and start bringing in other movies. What were the themes? 8 to 9 sentences. Again, that formula. 3 that are quoted, 5 to 6 in my own words. Now we're ready to deconstruct the elements that came together to actually make the film, beyond just the script. But let's start with the script. Okay, so first we have the treatment. And what is the treatment going to show to the person who may or may not put funding behind that project? That's right, the original author intent. See how we always go back up here to this introduction? So many people shortchange the introduction. They just put down introduction and then they just put down conclusion and think that's going to be it. No, no. Everything goes back to that, so it's important to keep it that way. So the original intent. Then we're going to look at the actual rough draft and the elements that remained all the way through. That's why we do the rough draft last, because we've already watched the film with the final draft and we have seen what changes were made there, and then we can go back to the rough draft and see how much of that original first draft remained all the way to the end of that first feature. Oops. And now it's time for the fun of the whole project, and that is the actual making of the film. This is the section, and each one of these are going to be perhaps multiple paragraphs. This is the section where you get to decide what elements of the film you want to explore. I don't care what it is. Let me just put down a thought of my own for this one. Okay, because of the kind of movie it is, I'm going to go with casting, filming, using the new special effects. All that stuff was hand matte painted. I kind of knew one person, not really knew them well, but I knew one person that was one of the matte painters on that film. And what? Not today, but in that day, it was very interesting. And then I always loved costumes. Not for every film, but for this film, costumes were key. Princess Leia, come on. That was 1970s, and how many people still dress up as Princess Leia? So I'm going to look at costumes. Now, whenever I decide which 3 aspects of filmmaking I want to do because I'm interested, then I will break this down. Each one of these little sections will be broken down. So casting will probably be 3 good paragraphs because I'm talking about the leads. New special effects I'll break down into matte painting, the interior of the spacecrafts, the famous bar scene. Remember the famous bar scene from Star Wars? That kind of thing. And then that bar scene will probably lead into my discussion of costumes, makeup and costumes. I'm going to, unless it just gets too big. And then that's it. The next is the result. And the result is stats. Of course, that's 3 sentences, 2 quotes. You can't just say, here's how much the film made. You have to know where that came from, who came up with that idea. And then the appeal, and that would be the critics. What did the critics have to say about it? So they're going to be a total of 3 sentences in the appeal per different appeal and 1 quote. So we can say key demographic, 22-year-olds found the Star Wars film to be groundbreaking and incredible, according to so-and-so, and I have a quote, who actually quotes some sort of poll or statistic or something. So that's this little area here, would be actually what makes this film a big classic. And then finally is the conclusion. And I don't ever want to leave this conclusion blank, because otherwise I'm going to come up with a mess. I'm going to be sitting there going, okay, I've written the whole essay. Now what am I supposed to say? So let's look at the conclusion. Okay, now when I have the conclusion already structured, I'm never going to get into that brainstorm of what am I going to do now, because I've already got it in the strategy. So when I'm researching, I can find quotes and pop them in here into this conclusion. When I write out my opinion, I can save one of the sentences that I've written and wordsmithed, and I can add it right here. And then when I look at the statistics of the result of the film, I can find one statistic that I can go ahead and put down here. Right? Whenever I find out from George Lucas who turned down the film, and I've got his quote from the numbers of places where no one would take a look at this 6-page treatment or the pitch that he was making for the film, I can take one of those quotes and put it right here as a quote. So one quote and one sentence in my own words. And by my own words, I'm not going to go over that again. Right? You see, when I have the conclusion already structured, look how pretty that is. Pretty little essay. And it's a 6-point essay that's going to translate into several different paragraphs. This key section here, of course, is going to be the meat and potatoes of the essay after I've completed the script. You can't talk about a film without talking about the script. But after that, then I get into this fun part, and this is where my images are going to go and my pictures of costumes. I'm just have a ball in this section. And then actually the result of this risk. And now I've got my conclusion strategy all done. I'm going to find one of the really nifty little quotes from George Lucas to end my essay. And the conclusion is, let's see, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 sentences. I might be able to get this appeal to an audience down to one. One of these is going to have to be shorter. All right? Fun? And finally, we're ready to write the thesis statement. Let's write that together. It is hard to believe that a franchise idea that was written as a 6-page treatment, filmed on a $10 million budget, and later turned into the Star Wars franchise, netting to date over $9.4 billion, began as a space opera that pitted the forces of good against the forces of evil. And that is, where is that forces of good and evil discussed? That's right here in the Star Wars themes. In a brilliant example of expert casting, innovative special effects, and what? That's right. That's right. A genius costume and makeup team. So the reader knows that the first thing they're going to find out about is more about this 6-page treatment. They're going to learn about the theme. They're going to learn about expert casting, innovative special effects, and genius costume and makeup. See? That's all there is to the thesis statement. I agree with you. This is too wordy up here. It's too, yeah, I don't like to put anything negative in a thesis statement because the reader is going to go, okay, well, if it's hard to believe, then I'm not going to read it. So let's recraft this. Let's wordsmith it. Okay, so now I've got a mess. In 1972, George Lucas had a fantastic idea for a space opera that he wrote as a 6-page treatment filmed on a $10 million budget, later turned into the Star Wars franchise, netting to date over $9.4 billion. Okay, and this is where we go off. Let's move this up here. Okay, let's do this. Had a fantastic idea for a space opera that pitted the forces of good against the forces of evil. Okay, let's just take this part, cut it. Where's that? Okay. The pit of the forces of good and evil. Okay, written. As a 6-page treatment, the Star Wars franchise netting to date over $9.4 billion. Okay. Okay, let's try this. George Lucas had a fantastic idea for a space opera that pitted the forces of good against the forces of evil, written as a 6-page treatment, filmed on a $10 million budget, and later turned into the Star Wars franchise, netting to date over $9.4 billion as a brilliant example of expert casting, innovative special effects, and a genius costume makeup team. Sounds good to me. We may have to wordsmith that a little bit later on, but as far as a bone structure to get started with this essay, I like it. All right. You will find now your own screenplay that turned into a movie that you love, and you'll follow this exact same formula. That concludes this tutorial.